This is the Truth Network. Welcome to Truth Talk Live.
All right, let's talk.
The truth is, I can't hide it, I can't hold it no more.
A daily program powered by the Truth Network.
This is kind of a great thing, and I'll tell you why.
Where pop culture, current events, and theology all come together.
Speak
Your mind.
And now, here's today's Truth Talk Live host.
Well, welcome to Truth Talk Live. Today, the question is, as we're talking about rescue the helpless, God's heart for the exploited. And where do you see the church's role in fighting child exploitation, and how has God stirred your heart along those lines? Again, this is a live show. We love your calls. We love your questions. And since we've got some folks that deal in this every single day of their lives, you have a question, gee, how can I deal with this with my kids? 866-348-7884, 866-348-7884. We have Whitney Miller with us. We have Mike Zwick with us. And in fact, we did a show on this topic earlier today for the Mike Zwick Show, coming up some Saturday in the future. But Whitney, welcome to Truth Talk Live.
Thanks. Glad to be here, Robby. It's always good to chat with you all.
It is. And so, you know, you have a chance to talk on this subject all the time, in which, by the way, if you got a young child with you in the car or something, it might be, this isn't a subject that they may be real comfortable with, or you may be comfortable with having that discussion with them in the car, because we will be using words that
probably aren't typically on Truth Network.
Yeah.
Let's just put it out there.
Yeah. Well, it might be a little uncomfortable, you know, and they're not. That doesn't mean we're going all that deep or anything. But we do want to make you aware that this is the kind of thing that we feel like is critically important for parents, critically important for grandparents. Whitney, these statistics literally blow our mind, especially in North Carolina. What's the age now of the average child that views pornography?
Yeah, so, wow, way to jump right in there, Robby. That is the scary concern, and it's not just in North Carolina, it's across our country, and honestly, if we took a look at it internationally, it probably wouldn't be too far off either, but we are seeing that average age of children viewing pornography for the first time or being introduced to it for the first time is that 8-9-year-old mark. Right. And so think about that, an 8-year-old. And now we're not just talking about what we grew up with. Right. Like it's not a magazine tucked away behind a counter in plastic anymore. This is what they are viewing via their cell phones or their tablets. And unfortunately, you know, media of all sorts, not just social media, right? Even YouTube, the stories we hear from parents, but even YouTube. Right? A couple of scrolls in and they have content before them that is intended for adults before a child's eyes. And it happens so quick. And, you know, I don't know if we mentioned this in the last showing this morning, but one of the top places that children encounter it is at grandparents' houses. It hits top of the charts. And why do you think that is? I'm looking at you guys. What do you
The grandparents don't suspect it.
The grandparents know less about technology often than even their children do, right? And so it creates quite a conundrum.
I resemble that remark.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't going to say anything. But it's true, right? How often, and then all it takes is our sweet little children to say, but mommy lets me.
Right?
Yeah.
That's all it takes. And grandma's like, well, if mom lets you look at the tablet for an hour, here you go, buddy. Free reign.
Right.
So you mean kids know how to play that game, huh, Whitney?
Didn't we? Let's be honest.
Mine do.
Didn't we?
Yeah.
And so, Whitney, you were talking about it this morning that you were talking to a lady that her child was looking at what was just, I guess, a pretty well-known young person show. What was the name of it?
This person was me as a mom. I had my child turn on the TV, just normal, right? Turns on TV and clicks on Disney Plus. Right? Something that we have been back and forth on before. We watch old Disney movies. We watched a 90s movie last night from Disney Plus, right? Where you think it's a safe space for your kid to log into. And unfortunately, the first thing that popped up when he clicked on Disney Plus was a show called Dying for Sex was the name of it. And it was front and center on my Disney Plus. And I'm like, what in the world? Now, here's the great part, not great, but the good part about it is I've been having conversations with my children for a while, right, about what is inappropriate. What does that look like? Because remember, my role as a Christian parent is safeguarding my children, preparing them for the world, and teaching them discernment, right? And so in doing that, I am preparing my children what they're up against, right? We're preparing them for war. Right? We are in a war. There's no doubt about it. And we are preparing them not just to put on the armor of God, but to fight with the armor of God. And so I think that having those conversations, as soon as that popped up, he said, Mom, there's something inappropriate on the TV. And of course, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's on the TV? You know? But, fortunately enough, there was no graphic images, but the words alone. And so where in spaces we think we are safeguarded or safe for our children to be, man, the enemy is a sneaky guy, you know?
Right. But again, I love the fact that this is a 12-year-old young man, right?
Yeah, 10. Yeah.
Oh, he's 10.
10.
He always acts older than that.
Don't
But
lie
it's
on
a
me.
10-year-old young man that knows enough to say Mom and then feels safe to know what he's talking about, that, wow, this is what you warned me about. And so, Michael, we talked about, you have an 8-year-old, right? And
I have an 8-year-old, and I mean, he's more interested in playing Legos, and than he is with, all this other stuff. But I was talking to Whitney this morning on the show, and I said, well, at what age should we start to talk to these kids about this? And she said, right now. And I'm thinking, what?
Yeah.
But, the truth is that the best way to really prepare somebody for something is to talk about it early. And yes, it is uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable for me talking to my 8. Would you even talking to the 6-year-old or 7-year-old?
Yes,
now?
yes.
So yes, it's going to be uncomfortable for me talking to the 8-year-old, 7, 6-year-old right now. But at the end of the day, would I rather feel a little uncomfortable now, or would I rather something happen later on and not be prepared for it and then not know what to do? And so sometimes we take the tough part first, and we have to go through the storm to be able to get to the other side. But it's something that I've definitely got to do, and sooner than later. Yeah.
So you could be sitting there like me, like, Whitney, exactly how do I enter into this conversation? Or you got a question along those lines. That's what we're talking about today, and we would love for you to call in 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. Again, rescue the helpless. See, the situation is that these children are being exploited, and the days of the white van, and stranger danger is not the way that children are exploited these days. Right. And it ramps up a lot worse than 8 years old and 10 years old. Yeah. By the time they're 13, 14, we'll get into some of that a little bit later. Yeah. But this is a great opportunity for you to enter into the conversation and think, what is the church's role? What is my role? How can I get my church more involved? Which, by the way, you can get Whitney to come in and speak, by the way. And she is with the Invictus Project, which has an amazing run coming up in Asheboro, North Carolina this August?
August 23rd. Yes, it's our 3rd annual rescue run, so we're excited.
And what the Invictus Project has all these law enforcement. And again, putting people away and whatever. But when you see the war that she's talking about, she couldn't be more right about it. And of course, one of the first places we can fight this war is on our knees, right?
That's right.
For our children.
Absolutely.
And how would you, if you're going to suggest to a parent, say Mike,
yeah,
how would you suggest, right? Prayer's got to come before that discussion, right?
It does, yeah. Oh, please, yes. Please enter into that conversation prayed up for many reasons. One, because it's important that you are seeking the Lord and how to speak to your child, because each child you speak to is going to come from a different situation or scenario. We may be speaking to our 15-year-old, our 10-year-old, and you don't know their level of exposure because they haven't come to talk to you about it, right? They don't think that mom and dad have any idea about what's going on in the world around them. And the truth is, they are probably right.
Are we going to a break, Nick? Is that why I heard? Yeah, that makes sense. I'm hearing the bump in music. So, hey, during the break, it's a great time to dial in. 866-348-7884. We had a few technical difficulties, but that sounds good. I like that music. We'll be right back. 866-34-TRUTH.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today's topic is Rescue the Helpless, God's heart for child exploitation. Like, wow. This is to say it's a war. I've got Whitney Miller here. I've got Mike Zwick. It is, yeah. But one of the key elements in any war is communications, right? If the enemy wants to wipe out, a battle plan, he'll go after the communications to cut those lines any way he possibly can, right? And so as we ramp this up, obviously through the Truth Network to get it out in any way we can, then you ramp it up, sharing this episode with people, sharing the podcast, all those kind of things, but also with the resources that are available. And so one of the gigantic resources we have here in North Carolina, and it is gigantic, is the Invictus Project. Invictus meaning truth.
Yep, uncomfortable. Yeah, love it.
And so, Whitney, share a little bit about the Invictus Project.
Yeah, so, I know this network goes well across the nation. So to share a little bit about what we are doing here in North Carolina, the Invictus Project is a nonprofit that supplements funding to the Invictus Task Force. So the Invictus Task Force is our law enforcement component, and they are combating the child exploitation and trafficking right here in North Carolina. I say that, but even our work we're partnered with the SBI and HSI, so that allows us a little more jurisdiction freedom. But it is a combination of 4 sheriff's offices, as well as Homeland Security and the State Bureau of Investigations, who have come together to create a task force of 14 individuals that focus solely on crimes against our children as it relates to the sexual exploitation and trafficking of minors. And so their sole focus is driven towards fighting for our children. And as the nonprofit, we get to come in and financially supplement the needs that our task force and law enforcement partners have while they actively pursue those that hunt our children. And we also get to educate our communities. And the partnership between us and law enforcement is beautiful because what it does is it allows me as an educator to the community to go forth with information that is occurring real time, right? What is happening? What are they seeing? What are those shifts as artificial intelligence is introduced to the mix, right? How is that impacting this fight for our children? And why that is so invaluable is because sitting in front of parents, I don't want to hand them information from a year ago. This fight is changing quickly, right? Just as much as our cell phones update and remind us we need to turn them off and update them tonight, right? Is how quickly this fight is evolving. And, it allows us to really jump in there and explain to our parents and our communities how they can best be equipped to engage in this battle for their children.
Right. And so this is an opportunity for all of you listening, right? There might be somebody out there that had this happen.
Yeah.
Right? And all of us could learn from your experience if you had the courage to call in and share that at 866-348-7884, or you had the courage to call and ask a question. How do I approach this? How do I do this kind of thing? What could I do to help? All those questions. There's no question I would love to get. 866-348-7884. But in this battle, right, as technology ramps up on their side, and it certainly has, you had mentioned in the show that we did with Mike for Saturday's show, these tips that come in.
Oh, yes.
Cyber tips. And how many cyber tips did we receive in the state of North Carolina?
Yeah. So, let me share with your listeners a little bit about what a cyber tip is, because that sounds very, unfamiliar probably to most unless they are on the law enforcement side of it. But what a cyber tip is it means that every platform, every service provider on the internet, so Snapchat, Instagram, Verizon, Spectrum, you name it, every service provider is a mandatory reporter of obscene materials, right? When it comes to child exploitation material, anything like that comes across their platform, they are mandated reporters. Now, they report that incident, that situation, that video, that picture to law enforcement, and it trickles its way down to wherever the area that particular image was or video was. They narrow it down to that arena, right? And so when we talk about the state of North Carolina in 2019 had 4,900-ish cyber tips come through the state of North Carolina. Now, I also want to share this because I think it's very important. When we're saying one cyber tip, understand that one cyber tip could house terabytes of videos and images of the worst of mankind as it relates to sexual abuse of children. And there's no real nice way to say that, but these are the worst moments of a child's life that are being recorded and videoed and shared amongst individuals, right? So that's what we mean when we say a cyber tip. These are not just photos. I hear it all the time. These are just photos. What's the big deal? I'm like, that's someone's baby behind that picture. That's someone's child behind that picture.
And in their videos, not just videos of the abuse. It's horrible.
Videos, yes. So in 2019, 4,900 cyber tips came through the state of North Carolina. Last year, we saw around 28,000 cyber tips come from the state of North Carolina. 28,000 cyber tips in the state of North Carolina. What happened between 2019 and 2021?
Right, obviously COVID.
Oh, and everyone went home, right? Everyone was locked away in home, and we saw this huge influx begin. Matter of fact, by 2023, there had been a 550% increase in cyber tips. 550% increase. Now we are expected to hit 33,000 cyber tips by the end of this year in the state of North Carolina, with January of this year being the largest month of cyber tips they've ever experienced or seen.
Right, and you can imagine what it takes to just follow up, and each one, like you say, can contain unbelievable amounts of horror.
Absolutely.
And just, it's unbelievable. But again, we this is a call-in show, and I'm just saying, this is your chance. 866-348-7884. And Michael, I appreciate that God put this on your heart, right? The reason we're doing this show is because God put it on your heart. And this is something that we need to get out on the radio.
Yeah, I had a prophetic dream. And so I've started having those years ago. And a few years back, I didn't know what was going on with these prophetic dreams. But I had a dream where my son had fallen, and it was terrible. And then I prayed the next day, and then instead of getting hurt or getting killed, he just hurt his leg. And then I had a dream about somebody was yelling inflation, inflation, inflation. And this was before all of that. And then a few months later, terrible inflation kicks in. So I had a dream where my daughter was actually taken away. And I realized that she was being trafficked. And so the next day at church, I said, does anybody know anybody who fights child trafficking? Nope. And I was just about to say, well, God, I don't know what you want me to do. And I said, contact Robby, and he got me in touch with the Invictus project. And this is just it's really a godsend. But, when I was thinking about this, one of the things that came to my mind is that sometimes this can feel overwhelming.
Yes.
Sometimes this can feel very heavy. But I just opened the Bible, and it's 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 9. It says that God is faithful, by whom you were called unto the fellowship of his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. So, Whitney, sometimes I'm sure this seems tough. Sometimes this seems overwhelming, but we have the victory in Jesus Christ. Amen. And I had a friend of mine who's fighting a lot of this similar stuff in our county, and she's helping the sheriff's department and all that stuff. But, she said sometimes it feels like I'm coming against hell with a water pistol. But at the same time, we are more than conquerors through Jesus Christ. And so the enemy was trying to fight us. When we first got on this show today, we couldn't hear anything. What did you say, Whitney?
Oh, well, I mean, Satan's a tricky guy. He tries to step in where he thinks he can impact it. And I love that you came back with communication is key, because I'm like, that's exactly what he's trying to disrupt here, right? But yeah, he's a joke.
But we have the victory through Jesus Christ.
We have the victory.
So, and I'm sure that when you go out every day and you do this, if you didn't know that Jesus conquers the devil or Jesus is more powerful, it might be pretty tough for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, we got to go to a break. We know that some audiences are going to have to go watch the podcast or hear the podcast, however that works, on Facebook, YouTube, or go to truthnetwork.com. The rest of you, hang on to your seatbelts. We got a lot more coming up. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. We would love for you to call in. This is a live show. How about you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced something that opened your eyes to the idea of child trafficking? And how did God meet you in that moment? Maybe you got a testimony for us of something that you witnessed or you saw, or you unfortunately got like, man, next thing I knew, there I was. 866-348-7884, 866-348-7884. I told you we might ramp this up a little bit, so here we go. Yeah. One of the things that's just completely disturbing, desensitizing the 8-year-old, the 9-year-old, like, oh, this stuff's out there, but by the time they are 11 or 12 years old, and you shared this statistic with me this morning, and I was like, holy mackerel, that our children are sending nude pictures of themselves. What was that statistic you shared?
Yeah, so 1 in 4 of that 11 to 14 age range are sending nude photos of themselves. And that is a hard pill to swallow when we speak to parents, right? Because our first inclination is like, oh, no, not my baby, right? Not my sweet little innocent baby, right? But the reality of it is our society is grooming our children and over-sexualizing them. So the sending of a nude photo is a lot less taboo than the time in which we grew up in, where somebody sending that, it would have been, whew, gosh, the names that she would have been called, I'm sure, or he would have been called, right? But now it's very, I hate to say it, but it is incredibly normalized amongst our teenagers across the board. I mean, it's not an uncommon thing, and
well, if it's 1 out of 4, that's basically 25%
it is.
of the kids
yes.
are doing that, and it is terrifying when you think about where that can lead, which we're going to get to in a minute. But first, we got Deborah is in Burlington. Deborah, you're on
Awesome. Hi, Deborah.
Truth Talk Live. Hi, Deborah.
Hello. Oh, you are sharing such valuable information, and the statistics that you're giving is just mind-boggling, and how this has increased so much here in the last few years. And I'm interested in what is the church's role and how we can get involved.
Yes, Deborah, you're awesome for asking that. I'm so thankful to share that question with all of us, really, because that is the question of the hour: is how does the church get involved in this? And there really are multiple ways, right? There are a couple of things I would say that within the church realm, I think it is important that we're addressing the concerns of over-sexualization and pornography. I think that's a really good start as a church to discuss, because the reality of it is that is a concern across the board in a large way. But also, our church is that place of fellowship. So are we creating that space where our children feel comfortable having these conversations with their parents, right? Are we engaging them in that way? I think that this is where the battle has to be waged, is in our churches, because we understand it's spiritual. You see, the rest of the world doesn't get that part. They don't understand what spiritual warfare looks like. But we as believers, we understand what that looks like. We understand what tools we have to combat it. And I think as a church, we have to rise up to fight this evil, not just for our children, but for children that don't have anyone fighting for them as well.
Yeah, and I would add, Deborah, that I'm a pastor, and I've certainly been a youth leader, that you can have, as a youth leader, you can have discussions with parents to say, is it okay if I go here?
Yeah.
And as a youth leader, you need to go there.
Yeah.
You need to say, guys, do you know that 25% of the kids out there are sending nude pictures of themselves? Like, listen to what can happen if you do that.
Yeah.
Talk about how valuable, right, their sexuality is, and why Satan's so desperate for it, and that intimacy and all those things can come from the pulpit too. And so, it's just, it's a fight, but I think prayer is gigantically involved. Like,
it is, yeah.
For all of the church to join in, God, what can we do? And what can we say? And so I'm curious about you, Deborah. What do you think?
Well, and actually at the church I worship at, between services, we have people that come in and pray for our church, for our leadership. Sometimes we even include things going on in the community. And we find that this is very important, not only for the church and the direction and, for the Holy Spirit to be operating within the walls of the church there, but, for us to even find out, it's a time when we share some things that we find out, just like today, what I'm finding out, and then we pray into that as well.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think that's a great start. But just don't stop at prayer. Be actionable too, because our kids they desire to have someone to tell these things to and to understand what is actually going on. So, Deborah, you're awesome. Thanks for starting there.
And Deborah's a friend of mine, so thank you for calling in, Deborah.
Yeah.
But you did get involved in something like this, Deborah. And you said there was a local group in Alamance County, and they wanted to get all the pastors together, all the churches together, and they said, hey, certainly every pastor is going to want to get involved in fighting child trafficking or human trafficking. But you said not everybody wanted to get involved. Is that right?
Well, that's it. I shared with Michael that I personally took time to ride through Alamance County and part of Caswell County to deliver information about a session that was going to be held at one of the churches regarding the exploitation of our children. And it was a very small percentage. Now, with that said, some churches may already be doing something or have already hosted something at their own church, because I'm just not aware of that. But it was a very small number that attended.
Yeah,
and that's disappointing.
It's a matter of prayer. I can tell you that, that is not an easy thing to do, as God knows.
Yeah.
To get a lot of churches on the same page on any particular issue. The interesting thing, though, is as things ramp up and the battle becomes more intense, it's interesting when it starts to get closer to home, people
won't have a
start.
choice.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Deborah. God bless you. I appreciate your call more than you know.
Well, God bless y'all as well. And thank you for this information that you're sharing with us today. And it's a difficult topic for a lot of people.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's real close to home, isn't it? I understand.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Deborah. Bye-bye. So, unfortunately, those pictures lead to what they call sexploitation, right?
Sextortion.
Sextortion. There you go. I know. So that all those words.
You just came up with a new term there.
There you
so
go.
That might be something soon.
Sextortion. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Whitney, explain that this is unbelievable what'll happen to some young man or whatever young woman.
Yeah, so I'll give you a bite-sized look at that. And so what that looks like is little Johnny's 14 on Instagram, and 16-year-old, Nancy, Sarah, whatever you want to call her, sends a message to him to be his friend on Instagram, asks to follow him, follow back, all the things. And she's beautiful, right? This profile picture is a beautiful 16-year-old girl. And remember, little Johnny's 14, 16-year-old girl, stunning, says she lives in the same state as him, maybe the same county, invites him to be his friend. Of course, he's going to say yes. And so proceeds a conversation. And unfortunately, that conversation leads to her asking something as simple as, if you send me one, I'll send you one. Right? And remember, we just discussed how these things are normalized already in our society for our children. So it's not like a moment. It's more of okay, Johnny's 14. She's a pretty 16-year-old girl. What's Johnny going to do? And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more often that Johnny sends the picture. And now this lovely 16-year-old girl is not a lovely 16-year-old girl. It is a 30-year-old male in another place. And sextortion begins, where he then begins to tell little Johnny, if you do not send me $250 via Cash App, Venmo, you name the platform, then I'm going to share these photos with everyone. Well, you may ask, how in the world are they going to share this with everyone? They don't even know this kid. Well, they became friends on social media. So now that person has access to everyone that likes Johnny's photos, everyone that's on Johnny's friends list, all because they are now connected as friends. And this person has every willingness and desire to send this photo out and sextort them if they do not pay them. Why? They have nothing to lose, right? And so now little Johnny's photos have made it out, and the harshness of it, the reality of it, is our children aren't equipped to handle that type of shame and embarrassment. And unfortunately, what we have seen is an uptick in teen suicides, especially targeted towards boys, because of that shame, right? The people on the other side of this, these conversations that are pursuing, are relentless. I mean, they are telling our children, well, you might as well end your life if you're not gonna do anything about it. And they're pushing, right? They're pushing because they're hoping to get some kind of monetary gain out of this situation. But for Johnny on the other side, this is the darkest moment of his little life. And he's not running to tell mom and dad, because would you? At 14, yeah. At 14 is the first thing you're going to go run and tell mom is, hey mom, by the way, I sent a not good picture and I need help, right? Not many, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're saying they want this money, and even worse than that, to me, I don't know. You can't get worse than that, maybe. But anyway, a lot of times they send the money and they still publish the pictures.
Do. Yeah.
And because what they care?
I mean, there's nothing to lose.
Let's destroy lives while we're at it. Satan is out to actually take out our. He's out to kill and destroy. I mean, that's what it's about. And so when we say exploitation, like
it covers it all.
And you think, well, it's only little girls getting picked up by vans. No. Much worse than this.
And unfortunately, I think we keep that mindset of our children are going to be kidnapped and run away with. And, that's not how the enemy has to work anymore. See, the game has shifted, unfortunately. And because we have been disengaged parents, we're not seeing it. We're not understanding that our children aren't having to be picked up on the side of the road anymore. We've handed them everything they need and the devices in the palm of their hands. We have handed the keys to our children's bedroom to the general public and said, come on in, when we've handed them a device.
Right. And Tammy and I were noticing it the other day. We were in New Jersey, interestingly, and we just looked around in this restaurant because, we were waiting to get on a plane. And like there are 2-3-month-old children, obviously. I mean, these children are, and there's a tablet sitting in front of their face in order to try to keep them from crying so that they can have a warm meal, like you say, or whatever. And so they're groomed like unbelievably from the time, and wait till you hear, we're not done.
No, we're not done.
But we would love to hear from you. 866-348. What's your question? What's your experience? 866-348-7884.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today's show, rescuing the helpless. God's heart for exploited children, and trying to get information out there. Again, we are so blessed to have with us Mike Zwick with If Not For God, and Whitney Miller with the Invictus Project, invictusproject.org. They've got all sorts of resources there. In fact, you can get Whitney to come to speak at your church or your youth group. And she was our youth group leader at West Asheville Baptist Church back in the day. Yeah. And just an amazing gift that God has given to the body of Christ here in North Carolina and across the world now. That God's given her a microphone to share, some of what's going on. But during the break, we actually have Mike in Dayton, Ohio, wants to chime in. But before that, Mike was going to ask a question, and Whitney said, "Hold that thought. Wait till that we can do this on the air." So she wanted to see his unfiltered
reaction.
reaction to her answer. And I know the
Yeah.
question that's coming, but go ahead, Mike.
Well, here was the question, and my heart kind of sank before I asked the question.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you don't want to hear the answer if it's the wrong answer,
Yep.
the answer that you don't want to hear. But is I've heard people say, don't put any pictures of your children up on social media. Don't put any videos or anything like that. And Whitney, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to share with you what I have done, okay? My thoughts are we have gotten accustomed to living our life out loud behind a screen. Yeah. And unfortunately, we have lost a lot in that, both quality of life with our family and our children, sometimes too busy taking the pictures. Right. But even more concerning is the fact that, technology advances quickly. And with AI capabilities, all it takes is someone snagging that photo. And there are platforms now that they can take any photo, put that photo in there, and it declothes the individual in that photo. And so you can imagine, as we're discussing terabytes of videos and pictures, how easily it would be for someone to take those pictures and videos of our children, our sweet innocent babies, and do that to them. And now they become in the hands of people that are not with good intentions. So my encouragement to you on that would be, is it worth it?
And also, Mike, just you just telling you, since God's given you the courage to step up and talk about these kind of things. How fun, since you now targeted, put a big old target on your back. How wonderful would
great.
Well, I'm just saying,
Truly.
right? That I'll take Mike's kids and let me show you what AI can do, because it can. Yeah. And the next thing you know, you got something. And then again, it's our job. God gave it to us to protect our kids, our grandkids. Yeah. And I hope you stepped up all the grandparents' games, Whitney.
I know.
Because
that's a hard one.
It is. It is hard to say, hey, when you come to grandma's, we're going to have a great time, but we don't have screens, and we don't do tablets or whatever it is that because one of the other things that you mentioned in the show we did this morning, Whitney, that was quite disturbing, is you had a friend that had a special needs, a nonverbal, wasn't it,
yeah,
daughter, and she was watching something that normally.
It was a very innocent show. It was Bluey. It's a child's cartoon, and to be honest, it's a cartoon that is fairly reasonable. It's got good family dynamics, decent values. But unfortunately, she was watching the show on kids' YouTube, and the words from the tablet, right? Because she made her turn it up to make sure she could hear what was going on. She was doing all the check pluses of a parent that is giving their child, time on a screen. And so everything she's hearing sounds like a normal show. But as she walks over there to her daughter, she sees that there is sexual activity between the characters in the show during a regular recording of the show. And so it had been manipulated and put on kids' YouTube.
Right. So here they took the AI again and said, hey, make this happen. Wouldn't this be whatever? And again, desensitizing and entrapping, just totally innocent. No doubt there's a millstone headed their way, but, nonetheless, we got Mike is in Dayton, Ohio. You got a story about your grandson, Mike?
Yeah, my step grandson, and this is close to home. It's not, this is not far fetched if people are listening. I'm 60 years old, and this is my step grandson, and my son calls me up and says, Dad, you wouldn't believe what happened. And I said, what happened? And then he said, well, Caden, which is, I was real hesitant to do all this online right now, but I'm a little bit nervous about it. But Caden was, it was online, and he was sexting, I guess that's what you call it. Yeah. And it was an undercover cop or a sheriff, and they were patrolling the internet, and they caught Caden sending inappropriate photos to this cop, and then the police officer, came to the parents and said, hey, this is what's going on. And my son just kind of called me up right away, and he lost it. I mean, he was crying about it. And I said, Michael, if there's nothing you did wrong, it's just one of those evil things that's out there, well, the police officer really helped them and me as well. how to make sure that there's parent controls on all the devices. And he came through and he showed them how to do all that. And Caden's a great young man right now. And this was about a year ago. And they're watching him like a hawk.
How old,
we're watching.
I know it's kind of invasive, but how old was Caden at the time of the incident?
He was about 13.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he was, it's really hard to believe that this could happen to you or happen to your grandkids or step grandkids.
And that's not unusual, though, right, Whitney?
No. And Mike, I'm so glad that you took a minute to call in and say that, because you know what? Often
it was really hard.
Oh, I have I have no doubt, because there's an element of what the enemy wants us to receive as shame, but really what you did is you just woke somebody else up that's listening into this, because it's that reminder that the enemy is real, and he is not he is not picky on who he takes down. He just wants to take anyone that has a lust or love for the Lord down, right? That joy for the Lord.
And my kids are really, my son and my daughter-in-law are a really strict person, and they really are on top of what's going on, and with their lives. And
that's
they're not.
That just goes to show you the battle that we're in, Mike. It just
exactly.
is. But I'm really, since we don't have a lot of time, and you brought up an amazing topic that we haven't really talked about, is controls on media. And can you speak to that a minute? Media.
Sure. Yeah. So, and it's really a two-part thing. Absolutely, there needs to be protective measures on your child's device. If your children have apps that they have downloaded that you are not familiar with, you need to get familiar with them before you allow your child to be on them. There is a great parent resource on our website that includes ways to set parental controls. But here's what I do not want to happen is sometimes we allow that to be the protector instead of us. Right. And remember, it is flawed, right? It is set up by the world according to the world's terms, and we know who is, well equipped in this world, unfortunately. And so, I think that it is so important that we do not excuse engagement, with our children for protective measures. So, I say that because I see it all the time, and I'll speak on behalf of teens that I've spoken to, and they are quick to say, "Hey, look, the more controlling my parents got, the sneakier I got."
Mm. Right.
And so that engagement piece is vital. Don't just throw the hammer down without discussing it with your children and letting them know, hey, this is why we're doing this. And I want to have those open conversations with you, and I want you to feel comfortable coming to me, because I know it's not a matter of if you see it. I know it's a matter of when this occurs.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, with my own kids and situations like that, it was really helpful from my perspective to say, hey, I struggled with this.
Yeah.
This is where I crashed and burned.
Yes.
And here's where I don't want you to crash and burn, because I did this stuff, right? And to admit your frailties and where you're broken and all those kind of things. Wouldn't you agree that he was strong, that I'm not the hero of this story, it's Jesus.
And our kids need to hear that. So often we come into a parent role where we want them to see perfection in us, but they need to see that we are not perfect. But we know who is, right? And that's what gave us that righteousness, that ability to step into that place. But our kids need to see us real and unfiltered, because they're viewing the rest of the world through a filter as it is. They need to know when they come home, there is real, unfiltered love there.
Right. And when they know that dad crashed and burned, it's easier for them to say, hey, I'm struggling here, and not feel as judged.
Yeah.
Because, obviously, and what you're talking about is shame on a level that we really, I don't think we could even scratch the surface of the shame that's out there on this particular subject.
Yeah.
And where it harms is in our intimacy, which screens tear down intimacy to begin with, because it's all artificial.
Yes. Oh, you are so on it right there, Robby. I've spent a lot of time on that particular topic, especially, and you're absolutely right. It has destroyed intimacy, even between a husband and wife. How many husbands and wives lay in bed scrolling at the end of the night instead of talking to each other, or spending that intimate time with each other? It's occurring across our nation, and it's not. You know what? I don't want this.
It's a quick fix.
It is.
It's a quick fix.
It's a quick subdue, right? I can just.
Can we call it an idol?
100%. 100%.
You know, it just is that it takes the place of God, which then, you know, God would put you back into saying, here, I developed this for intimacy. You need intimacy? Good.
Yeah.
Good. That is
I
have a channel
created
for it.
it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. We're supposed
You
to.
know? And those things saturate and ruin what was intended for good, right? That's what the enemy, if he can just give you a counterfeit version, that's what he will always do, right? Close enough to good, but not quite good.
Right.
That's how.
Right, Mike. I admire your courage for calling in today,
yes,
buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you, and God bless you. And hey, Invictus Project, Invictus, just like it sounds.
The Invictus Project.
The Invictus. Project.com. Don't forget the
.org. Invictus
Now, why did you say com? It's org. The Invictus Project.
Blame it on me.